questions from the interwebs. Welcome back to the Power Public YouTube channel. Today's video, we're taking all the questions from the interwebs, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So if you're following along, thank you very much. And now to the questions. The first question comes from Rob 7-7-7. And his question is, just want to know how we can tighten up the rear of the cart when it feels loose. Now I'm assuming he's talking about a bit of oversteer there, maybe on the way in, maybe on the way out. So if the cart's loose in the rear, you can do a couple of things. Normally we reduce some of the positive camber or increase the negative camber on the front end. So that can help slow the sort of loose feeling on the way into a corner. Otherwise, if it's an under braking issue, you could change the pitch of the cart, so you could lower the rear ride height. That can help, bind up the rear if it's oversteering a little. Otherwise, if it's power on oversteer, like you're in a 125 go-kart with a 50mm axle, I generally go to a longer wheel hub. So if I've got say a 78mm standard rear hub, I'll go out to the 115 double screw. That's a good fix for power oversteer. Anyway, there's a couple little things for you to try. So the next question comes from AKA Addy, and he's asking, what is a traditional way to check the caster and camber without using lasers? So what I would say, if you haven't got lasers, now they are the best, sort of most efficient way of checking and changing your front end geometry / wheel alignment. So I recommend saving up and getting some. But you could get the old school wheel alignment plates that used to bolt on instead of the wheels. So you measure at the front and measure at the rear, and you want to have the same measurement for straight ahead or a little toe out, little toe in. And then you can stand them up and down to do your positive and negative camber. It isn't perfect, but it's the next best thing. The other thing you could probably try to use is a couple of rulers on the wheel rims, and a tape measure. You'd have to lock the steering column on with a set of vice grips as well. So there is a couple of ways around it. You also could measure off the rear axle to the center of the front stub axle in the center line, and make sure they're the same along the cart from the rear axle to the front axles. So that's another way you can double check your toe in and toe out. So the next question is from Reese Clayton. He's asking, what's the difference between the red and the black ignition cap on the Rotax engines? The black is the old one, the red being the newer one. Okay, the color is obviously different. They just still plug onto the top of the spark plug. Is there a performance gain? I haven't been able to tell if there is one. You could go to the track and try the two. We sell the red ones, we sell the black ones too. We've got them both. If your cart comes with the black one, use the black one. Cart comes with the red one, like you've got a new Evo, just use the new red Evo one. And just get on with racing and focus on those tire pressures, because that is key. All right, so the next question comes from Trent Ashman, and he's racing tag restricted. So he's racing here in Australia, I would assume, because it's a class we run here. Anyway, Trent, you asked about what is the difference between the Douglas Mags and the MXJ or the MXCs. Okay, there's small variations in all things in karting, but they're all for personal preference. Is one going to make you go 3 seconds faster than everyone else? No. Is it going to change the way your kart responds on a brand new tire? Maybe. You need to try those things. My recommendation is start with the MXJs on your Tony kart, because that's what it comes with. Save up your money and buy a set of MXCs, so you've got those for the summer months or longer races. If your kart came with Douglas wheels, same thing, save up and get those MXCs at some stage. They're a great wheel. A lot of guys use them. A lot of guys win races. We chop and change between the two. It's not a game changer. It's not going to make the go-kart go from the back all the way to the front. It's a very subtle change. Generally, like I said, for the longer races, we're going to use the MXCs and the MXJs for the shorter club day racing. The next question comes from Tobista number 1, and he's asking, what are some pre-race checks for his DD2 Tony kart? So what I would recommend checking is the sort of cable tension on your gear selector. Just make sure those bolts haven't come loose. Also too, you can check your gearbox oil. You take your carburetor off, give that a carburetor service. Now we do have a video on how to do that. You can click that link in the description below. For the Delorto carburetor, it's a pretty in-depth video on how to tune the Delorto carb before your Rotax engine. So check that out if you haven't already. It's got some great information. Also too, I'd probably check your brake master cylinders for fluid, and the pedal, make sure it's not too spongy. If you haven't checked those, that's a nice one to keep your eye on, because it can accumulate a little bit of moisture over if you've had your kart sitting for a while and you don't want spongy brakes. And then obviously too, your engine mount bolts, all the nuts and bolts, a quick spanner check, takes about 5 minutes, and tire pressures, bead lock screws. Other than that, you'd be good to go. Okay, so the next question is from Martin Bondessen. You're asking about the Rotax Max carburetor and how do you get it to idle. And I would not be too worried if the kart doesn't idle on the stand for ages. You can always just rev it up using the throttle by hand. A lot of carburetors, when I'm driving out the track, I'm never idling unless the engine is stalling, and then you can just adjust the screw on the side with the spring to lift up the slide inside the carburetor. Now, if that's not enough, you can adjust a little bit of cable tension on it as well if you're really having problems with it. But generally, once the engine's hot under full operation, it's going to idle fine if it needs to on the circuit, say under brakes or heavy braking. You just want to be able to lock up the brakes if you have to and the engine not stall. So if your engine's not doing that and it's performing perfectly and you're winning races, don't worry if the engine doesn't idle on the stand, because you're not racing on the stand, you're racing on the track. So focus on the track tuning, and whatever happens in the pits is not relevant for my performance. So I don't recommend changing it for yours. Hope that helps. Okay, so the next question is from JC51, and they're asking about what is the best way to get rid of oversteer coming out of corners. Now, we kind of just touched on this one, but for oversteer coming out of corners, generally power on oversteer, I would either drop my tyre pressures half to 1 pound, but if you're already low enough in the rears, like you're not coming on quick enough or something like that, go to a bigger rear hub. So if you've got your standard hubs, go to the double knuckles. If you've got your shorties, go back to your standards. So you just go up 1 hub length on your rear axle. Hope that helps. The next question is from Constantin_Cornwell 06. And he's asking, why do my brakes suck? Maybe you need to do a full brake overhaul. We have a video on this. If it's a Tony kart, you can buy the seals, you can buy the fluid, you can buy the pads, you can update your kart. So there's plenty of options out there. So if you're having problems with your brakes, pull them down, give them a good service, give them some new fluid, give them some new seals, new pads, go hit the track and be awesome. Racer LT78, when's the Doc's birthday? Just had one yesterday. HB to me. Thanks for everyone who gave us a shout out and a birthday wishes yesterday. I really appreciate it. The next question's from Caspar, and he's asking, is the new hot dog style OTK NASA panel worth the money? Yes, it is worth the money if you want to update your kart for the new look and bring it up to sort of the 2020 spec. Is it going to make you go 3 seconds a lap faster? I don't think so. If you've got a track with a mega long straight, for drafting it's probably a little bit of an advantage, but it's up to you. I mean, realistically, if you've got the money and you want the look, go for it. If you want to spend the money on tyres and go faster, do that instead. The next question's from Sharon the Prado, and she's asking, how do you not get at karting? There's only one true way to improve your go-karting, and that is to go more than everybody else. The more you go, the better you get, and you catch up to your competition while they're sleeping. So new tyres and more Ks, go to the track a lot, practice a lot, do your best, and that's how you get better at go-karting. The next question comes from our friends at Enzo Racing, NL, and he's asking about bump drafting, and is it bad for your chassis? I say no, plenty of guys do it. The front and rear bars take up any of the cushioning, and if you're doing it in the straight line, it's kind of an advantage for both you and the guy you're pushing along down the straight. Now, I definitely don't recommend hitting anyone up the rear tail into the braking zone. It's a definite no-no, so make sure if you're bump drafting, you're well clear of the competitor in front of you when you go into the brake zone, because you don't want to hit them out of the way in the brake zone. It's a big no-no, definitely not good for racing. His second question is about sim racing and how it affects your performance. I haven't tried it myself personally, but if you've got a simulator at home and whenever you're practicing racing, you're thinking about racing, and you can make the connections when you're back at the racetrack yourself. All the V8 guys do it, all the Formula 1 guys do it, so it definitely would, I would suggest, improve your performance. If those guys are doing it, it's definitely working. So if you've got a simulator, you've got access to one, get on it, get practicing. More time racing is more experience, and experience wins. The next question comes from Thomas Howling, and he's got a DD2 with some heavy shifting problems, and he wants some recommendations. Thomas, what I'll do, if you've got a heavy shifting DD2, change gearbox oil, maybe that's heavy. Also too, check your cables. If they're old, put some new ones. Otherwise, spray some lanolin / PTFE sort of WD-40 spray down inside the cables to make them as lighter action as you can get. And also to check the ends of the cables to make sure that you haven't compressed them and they're rubbing on so the outer sheath is not rubbing on the cable. Next question comes from Will Seacombe, and he's asking when his Des getting back in the cart. That's me. And Will, geez, I don't know, mates. When the demo DD2 is back up and running, I'll be getting in that, no doubt, 100%. And as for racing, it's been a bit of a funny start to 2020. We've got a few cancellations of the races over the next few weeks, so it won't be anytime soon for racing. And then when racing starts back up, we're going to be busy again. So it probably won't be till later in October, November 2020. Okay, so the next question comes from Thomas Howling. He's got a couple of questions. His next question, when do I know when to change my chain on my Rotax Max Senior? And what I'd say is, if you're using an O-ring chain, it will last several months. If you're using a gold chain, DID, that's what we use, you might get 1 to 2 race meetings out of it, so 3 to 4 hours. If you're using the black chains, about the same or less. If you're just using a non-O-ring chain, every race meeting, give yourself the best opportunity by buying yourself a new chain when you put your new tyres on. And then do some practice on it. And when you go for the next race meeting, get yourself new tyres, get yourself a new chain. And that way you've always got the best equipment to win races. If you're just recreational, you can just keep going until the chain's chewed up all the sprockets, and what's it matter if you lose a little bit of performance. But if you're into racing, when you buy new tyres, buy yourself a new chain. Nice and easy. And the last question for Thomas is, how do I know when to use more or less camber and wider, narrower front wheels? Okay, so obviously it's when your balance is not right on your go-kart, whether you're going into the corner or going out of the go-kart, and when you're going into a corner or out of a corner, if you've got too much positive camber on or too much negative camber. So they're the things you're just going to have to play around with. Now, newer tyres are generally you have a neutral camber and just your sort of 5 to 10 millimeters of spaces, whatever you're normally used to. Now, as your tyres wear, the kart won't steer in as well, so you'll start to go to your positive cambers and your wider wheel tracks. But you've got to remember, when you put your new tyres back on and you go qualifying, you might have a front end geometry change to do before you hit the track. So you reduce some of your positive camber again back to neutral, put your new tyres on and send it. Okay, so the next question comes from JBW21, and he's new to karting and he's asking questions about a mini rock engine and what is their peak performance in hours between rebuilds. And what I'd say to that is, it's different for everybody. Some guys are that fanatical about their race engines. They want them rebuilt before each major racing event. So it's best when it's brand new, say that first hour or so. Other guys don't care. They're just there cutting laps, going as hard as they can. So if you're new to karting, you can run your mini rock up to about 15 hours, 10 to 15 call it, for no real performance loss that you're going to notice because your driver's still learning. So you're investing that money into your driver. Then as you get more serious, if you're going to the world titles, sure, maybe get your engine rebuilt before that. So if you're a very serious racer, do your engines more often. If you're a club day racer or you're new to karting, go as often as you can. Worry about your engine rebuilds a little bit later on. The next question comes from Georgios K, and he's asking if he leaves his kart sitting around for 2 or 3 months, does he have to put oil in the cylinder? And I say no, the go-karts can sit around for several months, if not longer. There's a lot of oil inside a two-stroke because obviously when it's running, the oil is in the petrol and that all condensates inside the engine. You can put a little bit of oil down through the spark plug hole if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it. You can just start them up on the stand. There's not much load on the engine and there's a lot of fuel going through the motor at idle and with light sort of throttle positions, and the engine's going to have tons of oil, and you'll see that coming out the exhaust when you start up a go-kart engine. There's always tons of smoke, and the smoke is the oil burning. So wherever there's the oil burning inside the engine, it's flying around in there on all the bearings, on all the seals, and it's no problem at all. So would I fill up the engine with oil? My answer is no. Next question's from an OG supporter of the Power Republic YouTube channel, Chris Ramnow. So thanks very much, Chris, for tuning in. Chris is asking, is there a performance difference for the new Jekko seats in the Tony Kart over the standard Tony Kart seat? Now, I haven't personally tried it myself. I've put one in for customers and I'm going to be putting one in our shop DD2 Tony Kart this year because they're awesome, they look cool, I like them. But as for performance variation, I don't know. If you have a problem with your kart and you need a softer seat, say you wanted to try the Tillit T11, then the Jekko is probably, an awesome seat to try. They do have a little bit more sort of support through the side of your legs. So if you're flopping around in your kart too, it might be another reason to try the Jekko. I definitely don't think it's going to be a performance disadvantage. So if you've got the spare cabbage, I say jump up, grab one, and go put it in your kart and go and dominate. So the second question Chris had for us is to do with weight distribution. And he asked, if we were to put lead on a kart, do we use scales? If so, how close can we get 50-50 left or right across the kart? So yes, scaling a kart is a great way to see your weight distribution, especially if you've got maybe 5 or 6 kilos to play with. So it's great to get your balance perfect across the kart. Yes, you should be able to get 50-50 on each side of the kart, and then front to rear, you're going to go for your 42-58 or your 43-57, depending on your preference, how much front to rear weight balance you want. Now that is for a senior kart because they've got the bigger tyres on the rear. Your cadet karts, you're going to go closer to your 50-50 all around because the tyres contact patch is about the same. So put your kart on the scales, get your driver to jump in with his helmet and race gear on, and then you can place the lead around the kart to get the weight just perfect how you want it. The next question comes from John Sinclair, and he's asking about a Micron 5, how to get his theoretical laps and his sector times on one page. Now I don't believe you can do that. There is pages in your Micron 5 that you can call up by pressing the memory button, and that will show your theoretical and your sector times. So you press it once, press it twice, press it 3 times, and it flips through the different pages. So try that, and I hope that helped. Okay, so we've got a little combo question coming up from John Macca McDonald and Wayne Ruddick, and they're asking about where to put the Micron lambda sensor in their exhaust pipe, like for a KA100, Rotax, or an X30. And with the heated lambda sensors for the Micron 5, you can put them anywhere in the pipe, really, because they run on 12 volt power to heat them up to temperature if they're running not at optimum temperature from the exhaust gas. Now, if you're running a non-heated lambda sensor, you're going to need to go about 115 millimeters from the end of the exhaust pipe back, say for the Easy Tune style one. But if you've got the Micron one, you can actually put it down in sort of that wider part of your exhaust pipe in between the diverging cone and the converging cone. So like you can see on this one here, we've got the weld-on welded into the body of the expansion chamber here, in between the diverging cone and the converging cone. Otherwise, you can put them here. That's the old school place, which is about 115 millimeters from the end of the pipe. So just remember, if it's non-heated lambda sensor, put it closer to the exhaust port. If it's a heated lambda sensor, put it over in the middle of the exhaust. So the last couple of questions from Geordie Shoemaker, and he's asking about the sealing of the Rotax exhaust on the Rotax exhaust socket. And is it an advantage to seal it up like they do on the new Evo one for his non-Evo exhaust pipe? Now, the Rotax exhaust will leak as it wears. It's steel on steel, and with all the vibrations, if it's a little bit old, you'll get a little bit of leakage there on the header, and that will condensate as black oil all around the base of your engine. It's not detrimental to the engine's performance, as in the oil there. It just makes it look dirty. So if you're concerned, you could, at a minimum, change your exhaust socket to the new Evo style and run that in your older pipe. Otherwise, buy the new Evo exhaust and upgrade the exhaust and the exhaust socket so you get less leakage totally on the exhaust housing of your Rotax Senior Max. That's what I would do. That's what I recommend. Thanks to everybody that asked a question this week. Really appreciate it. Instagram, Facebook, everybody that's following along, thank you so much. If you want to support us and support our channel, you can buy a t-shirt off our website. You can check out our Racing Rituals tutorial series. You could go to our Patreon page and get on board over there. Thanks to everybody. See you in the next video. I just threw that one in there in case you liked it. The first question comes from Rob77-7. 7-7-7. Can you cut that last bit off? And his question is, hey bud, that was a bit crap at the end, but can you cut that out? I don't know. Fa la 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 la.